back. Meerkatted.
Nick, it's your topic. Go. You crazy bastard.
Good Lord.
My topic. So this past weekend, I had a great weekend. I was invited up, of course, to my to Lake Tahoe to see my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law.
Of course, naturally.
Because it was the holiday weekend. Did
Memorial
you guys
Day.
all enjoy your Memorial Day?
Played a lot of Witcher.
I spent
Right.
the weekend for me was editing the Kind of Funny live show.
YouTube.com/.
Was that fun
So-
for you?
It was extremely fun. It was also very stressful rendering and all
Really?
that stuff. Rendering it. Like it was just there was a
took
lot
forever?
of exporting problems because anyone that's edited videos will know. The first export is never it. Your desktop by the end will have
it's
a
50.
million files that are
V4,
final,
V5,
final
final
V5,
V5, yeah.
final fucking, I really fucking hope this fucking works, V7, and whatever. So we got there, but as the time this posts, the live show will definitely be posted.
YouTube.com/kindafunny.
Yeah. And the whole show will be there in its entirety. And I'm really trying to push this. I want this to be a video. I'll tell you guys about this later. But we need to socially push this harder than we've pushed anything ever.
Okay.
Even harder
I
than
want
the
the
Fast and
world
Furious
to know.
live stream. It's at currently 1.2 million on our
Yes,
channel.
because we didn't push that at all.
Does it pain you that Greg still holds the record for the highest grossing video on our channel?
Tim doesn't care.
No.
Tim doesn't give a shit.
One day I'll shatter that.
He's gonna shatter it. Challenge accepted.
It'll be good. I don't know.
Anyway, so I love going up to Tahoe. I love seeing my family, and it's great that they're very, very close. And specifically, I like it because we do a nice mix of like outdoor activity. We'll walk around, we'll hike sometimes. Sometimes we'll go, just out and about Tahoe because it's so beautiful. And then for the rest of the time, we just eat really bad food and watch movies.
Great.
Which is my absolute favorite thing to do because I get along very, very well with my brother and sister-in-law.
Not your wife so much.
No, my wife is amazing, but been there, done that. So I don't even think about her that much anymore. However, there was one thing that I noticed this past time. So we watched a lot of movies, and we watched a lot of bad movies, so it didn't bother me too much because, it's more about the company and who you're with.
And
what
you
you're
love
doing.
bad movies, let's be
And
real.
I fucking love bad movies. So I'm going to go off. I'm going to list off what we watched.
Okay.
Black and White.
Don't even know what that is.
It's a Kevin Costner movie.
Pokemon game.
Damn right.
We watched Draft Day. Another Kevin Costner movie. A Dolphin Tale 2, because they made a second one of those.
What the fuck? What is that?
Dolphin Tale 1 was about the dolphin that didn't have a tail that they made a prosthetic flipper for. And then it was
like the
big.
plot
Like
on
a
the title.
flipper, like side story?
No, it literally is. This is a true story. You can go down to Florida and see Winter, the dolphin that doesn't have a tail. The way they rescued this dolphin, and it was like super depressed, and it had scoliosis of the spine because it just didn't have a tail. And they figured out that if they went to like a lead prostheticist person that makes prosthetics.
Prosthesis?
Colin, you're supposed to correct me when I get the wrong word.
Prostheticist, maybe?
Prostheticist?
I don't know.
A doctor.
Somebody who makes now I can't even say
yeah,
it.
no
An
one can say it.
engineer.
Say Northeastern five times fast.
Can't.
Anyway, they go to him and they're like, "Hey, is there any way possible that you can make a fin
Fucking Robotail.
for like a tail for this dolphin?" Because it's dying. Basically, if a dolphin can't swim, obviously it's going to get super depressed. Because dolphins have feelings like they're smart. They have emotions like human beings.
Yeah,
Like,
so
it's fucking
let's give him
depressed.
fucking robot parts.
So we
Damn
we
right.
made
We're
it
fucked.
basically
We're so
RoboCop.
fucked.
But it was actually fascinating. The first one was fascinating because they had to figure out what kind of material they could use that the dolphin wouldn't freak out because they're not used to having
Robotails.
robotails at all. And anyway, long story short is it accepted the tail and eventually became a huge national sensation.
Was
and
the
you can still
sequel
go see it.
about him?
The
Or his
sequel
friend?
was about him as well because they have to pair dolphins
Mm-hmm.
in order for them to I guess not the FDA.
The FDA's out
It's
there
definitely the
pairing.
FDA.
No, it's
and
not the
pairing
FDA.
dolphins.
What's the other group that covers wildlife?
PETA?
No,
It's a government thing?
Fish and Wildlife?
I thought it was the Food and Drug Administration, but it's
probably
not.
not.
Doesn't matter. Anyway, the government comes in and says, "Look, you can't keep a man like an animal of this like stature by itself. You have to have a pair because otherwise they get super depressed and they die."
And because it's a sequel, so.
And because it's a sequel, so it was about finding the pair
Yeah.
for Winter because her pair
Yeah.
dies. Like
I mean,
her
it's
partner
rare that
dies.
the whole cast of the first movie comes back for the sequel. So that's
They got
cool.
everyone back, and I'm
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
talking everyone. Here's the deal: they got Harry Connick Jr., Ashley Judd, Morgan Freeman came back for this. Chris Christopherson came back.
This isn't real, right?
It's 100% real. I watched it.
Dolphin's Tale 2 has these people in it.
They all came back for it. They got Morgan Freeman's like this. He's just
the
smiling the entire
waters
time.
are
I got
receded.
paid $10 million for this. Put the tail on the dolphin. Anyway, had a lovely weekend watching all those bad movies. We watched one other one, and I can't remember. It was Focus with Will Smith and Margot Robbie. And I'm
Oh.
glad they held that movie because she was not very good in it. She's better now. But apparently they filmed that movie a while back, and then she got big because of Wolf of Wall Street, so they held it. and then release that after. This happens a lot in Hollywood where they're like, this movie's not that good, but she's got a Martin Scorsese movie coming out, so let's hold it. And then if
Release
you
it on
notice,
that
Focus
namesake.
came out like 6 months later. That was very strategic. But what made the movies slightly worse, and this is the topic, a long-winded sort of trail to get to my topic, was that my sister-in-law, God bless her, and she knows I love her, likes to watch everything with TrueMotion on.
Good Lord.
And if you're not familiar, you probably have this on your TV. It's probably called something else, either Smooth Motion or TrueMotion or whatever. Basically, what this process does, and I'm probably going to slaughter this, but to the best of my knowledge, is it artificially creates new frames in the picture to make it look more like video or more like real life. Now, to the untrained eye, it makes everything look more crisp, more vibrant. It makes the motion a little bit more like a 60 frames per second video or a video game. And so you're getting that really hyper realistic sort of look. People are starting to like this.
No, take it off TVs.
It's so offensive.
To the point where my wife actually went to visit her friend in Atlanta, who we might end up actually seeing. And
going to her
she cannot, yeah, we're going to spend the night there. She cannot watch anything without this on.
Ugh.
And my wife's like, calls me. She's like, Mel's in the bathroom right now. How do I turn this thing off? She won't notice. And I had to walk her through turning off, and sure as shit, Mel noticed.
Yeah.
She was like, what happened to my TV? What, did you do something?
No, because a lot of people I know that I don't respect at all, they they think that that's what HD means. Like they think that's HD. Like, oh, no, you don't have an HD. This isn't an HD TV. It's like, I want to kill you.
Yeah.
Like, there's not many things that will make me want to murder someone, but this apparently is one of them.
Yeah.
So, for people out there that aren't as crazy about video as we are, which I'm sure there are not many of our fans probably are. I think a lot of our fans probably are. But for the few people out there that don't give a shit about frame rate and specifically like how that's accurately portrayed from what the people who either made the movie or designed the game wanted it to be, it's hard for me to watch something that was what they say acquired in 24 frames per second, and then that is artificially kind of inflated to 30 or 60 frames per second. It just, to me, destroys the visual fabric of the storytelling. It looks terrible. It does weird stuff to the lighting in the film, and it really, there's such a thin line for what they call the magic or the art of making movies or TV, right? And that relies on a number of different things, but one of the biggest is that it's 24 frames per second. And all of us that have grown up with that technology see that as a film, and we're sort of lulled into that like suspense of disbelief, and it's that passive experience. But man, when I watch something that's got that like hyper realness to it, I can't relax. I'm constantly watching it. My brain's constantly like, this is wrong. This is
It
wrong,
makes
this is
everything
wrong,
look
this
like
is wrong.
CG.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
It makes everything look like the Transformers movies, where it's just like the fake things are just moving around, even if it's a human, and it's really, really distracting.
My wife even mentioned that. She was like, what's the word I'm looking for? And I'm like, everything looks
Transformers
composited.
Yeah.
Like it looks like everyone was on a green screen and the background is just not real.
Yeah.
This was a problem people had with The Hobbit, right?
No.
It's a similar problem.
Didn't they film it though at
They filmed it
60
at
frames
48.
per second.
At
48, yeah.
Okay.
so it looked fucking whacked out.
But that's different though, because so that
that's
was
native at
made,
least.
What was the word you just said?
That was natively acquired at.
Acquired,
that was
yeah.
shot at 48 frames
Yeah.
per second.
But
with
I
two
mean-
reds. And that was actually done specifically for the 3D and the compositing in it though.
I thought that was done for the battle scenes because in theory, if there's more frames, you'll be able to see the
It's
fights
crisper,
better.
yes.
Because if somebody's swinging an axe in a normal movie, it happens really quick and it's hard to follow action movies.
You get-
like
so-
Avengers or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it has to do with a lot of motion blur and how that's been.
But the big thing is like I could be wrong and you probably know this better, but the eye only sees at 28 frames per second. So if you're doing animation, it's only 28 frames in a second.
I don't know actually. I meant to look that up before the
Well,
show.
that can't be true, because you can see the difference between 24 and 60.
That depends. Even in video games, like there are some games where you can notice, and the only big time you really notice in a lot of video games is if you're using a mouse.
But
'Cause
like
you're looking
but I mean,
very quickly.
for
Well-
movies. Like if you look at it, if you watch The
You
Hobbit
can-
in 48,
Oh no, it will look different, but your mind doesn't necessarily process it the way that it's supposed to.
Well, I think what you're thinking is, and I could be wrong on this, but in order to perceive motion in images, it has to be at least 16 frames per second.
That could be it.
So if you drop below 16 frames per second,
it looks like stop motion.
It looks like
instead of
stop motion,
something
or it looks,
fluid.
or your brain goes, that is a series of still pictures that are being put together.
Yeah.
At 16 frames is when the human brain goes, I'm
Oh,
watching
this
motion.
is something moving. Yeah.
And apparently, and I looked this up, so I could be wrong, but this was from old school film school. Is that the reason we hit 24 is because during sound constraints had to in order to sync sound with video with film. It had to be at least 24 frames.
that
That's what I was
makes
going to
sense.
ask you how they
was-
settled on that.
Yeah, so that was how they settled on 24 frames. And of course, back in the day and to this day, film stock is incredibly important. So you didn't really want to push it that extra 6 frames per second because you're talking about miles of film at the end of the day that cost a ton of money per foot. So they were like, 24 is the bare minimum we could do. That's what the entire industry settled on. And it's not right or wrong, by the way. It's just we all as a group, that is what we came up knowing. That is how we perceive narrative, the high art of storytelling in film to be. So it's not to say that 20 years from now or 60 years from now, because everything's digital now, it's just literally a setting on our camera that we switch over that says go from 24 to 60, that we might not enjoy everything at 60 frames per second later down the road. But for right now, I equate 60 frames per second as video, which means soap opera. And so when I'm watching Will Smith have sex with Margot Robbie in a soap opera, I'm like, this is not sexy. This is just weird, and I don't get.
Well, it's also very soap opera or home movie, and I think that's the thing that's like weird about it is that it looks like
Yes. It looks like
you know
video.
your home videos from the '90s that like it's real life, like that's shit that really happened. So it's kind of off-putting to see Will Smith naked in real life.
How was the sex scene, though?
Not hot, but just because they didn't have a lot of chemistry. And Margot Robbie, it was her first film. I don't think she wasn't. It wasn't a great film. It kind of derailed about halfway through. Where you're like, what is this about? Starts off really, really well. It's worth a watch.
There's no focus, you would say.
I was like, damn it.
It does suffer sadly from a lack of focus.
So what is the question then? What is
the question? Is are there any other things in tech right now that get you like that? Like to me, that is one of those things where I'm like, if I see this, my brain instantly goes,
Why are you
please
doing
convince
this?
this person to change this. Like you have to use all of your knowledge from the 4 years of that weird film school you went to, and all of your knowledge of the 10 years since shooting video to tell this person why this is so wrong.
Yeah.
Is there anything else like that in your lives? Is there anything that bugs you from a tech perspective like that?
When notifications are still on a PlayStation 4, turn that shit off. You don't need that.
Notifications in general. I
Yeah.
think that's a good one. Just
Yeah.
like when you don't want them, there's such a
Don't get the Apple Watch then.
no, you need to finely tune it to your exact taste,
Right.
app per app, system by system, like all these different things, and it's like, holy crap, the day someone understands how to make one app that controls all your notifications for your life, how you want them to. Oh man, it's gonna be good. But until then,
There you
good
go,
Lord.
smart guy. Make that app. Jay.
James is like, hold on a second.
Kind of funny notifications coming out later this year.
Yeah, we talked about it before, but the whole 30 versus 60 frames a second and 1080 versus 720 arguments in gaming really annoy the shit out of me because people use these as benchmarks of game quality, and that's really not true. I agree that a shooter is sharper and better to play probably at 60 frames a second, but not every game needs to run at 60 frames a second. Not every game needs to run even anywhere near 60 frames a second to be good. So I hate that, and not every game needs to be in 1080.
Yeah.
A game that runs in 720 is not a poor game. It's a matter of the visual fidelity of the game matters to a lot of people, not so much to me. But it's more about how does the game play. 60 frames as an element of gameplay matters in a Twitch shooter, but it doesn't necessarily matter in a game like The Witcher that runs at 30 frames.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And The Witcher running at 60 frames is not going to make it a better game. So that whole argument about 30 versus 60 frames a second and 720 versus 1080 in resolution, whatever, actually is starting to annoy the shit out of me because it's like, let's look at the game. The game runs at this and this. Is it good? If you ran at a higher frame rate or a better resolution, would it make it better? Not necessarily. Okay, then let's stop arguing about it. You know?
Right.
In other words, there are certain games where it really benefits, and then there are certain games where, most games, I would say, where it doesn't matter.
I think
as long as the game's
constant
not,
frame rate is the most important thing.
Yeah,
like a
locking
constant
frame rate.
30. Yeah, locked. That's when it's really necessary.
And
But
that's-
I'm a numbers whore. I want 1080, 60 for everything.
Yeah, but it's not. It's like
Well,
I think some
it
games actually look
depends.
weird. I think some games look
agree.
weird at 60 frames, and it's not to say that it's better or worse. And I'm not saying that all games look weird at 60. Of course, you want to play Call of Duty at 60 frames a second.
Yeah,
It's
you
a
have
fucking
to.
shooter.
Yeah.
You know, but The Witcher at 60 frames, I don't really know if that would even be necessary, and how much that would take from the PlayStation 4's power to run that game means that resolutions must be less or whatever. You have to make sacrifices. So I just feel like this. I just feel like this argument. It annoys me because I know some people can see it and it bothers some people, but all I can see is I can tell if a game's running at a great frame rate or 60, and I can tell if a game's running at an okay or a good frame
Yeah.
rate, and I can tell if the game's not running right.
Right.
But I'm not the guy, like, I've known like savants that we used to work with
Craig
that are, like,
Harris.
that are like 22 frames a second. And I'm like, how the fuck could you possibly know that? You know what I mean? And then you put on the thing and you're like,
put
you're
the
right, it's
benchmark on
22
it there.
frames a second. You
Well,
know?
let me ask you this. Let's take the opposite of that, though, right? I watched you guys play The Order, right? Which is a game that purposely tries to be more cinematic. did that add to the experience to have it be a more cinematic frame rate?
You'd say the same about The Last of Us too, the PS4 version.
Yeah, the PS4 version ran at 60.
Right.
You could lock it at 30 though. Yeah, I mean, I thought the order played fine and looked pretty. So was it?
No, and I'm not judging the game quality. I'm saying
No,
is that
you can judge it because it's not a very good game.
A lot of people would like they try to present that game like an anamorphic aspect ratio. They wanted it to play more like a cinematic experience. Is that something that you guys think would be? I mean, is that beneficial to the game to do that, or is it just kind of like, dude, now we want 30 frames per second at least?
Yeah, I think-
is that minimum 30 frames per second?
Yeah, I think if your game's running both, and that's the thing to the point I'm making. Like sub 30 is not optimal for any game.
Right. Yeah.
Because and it's not so much the way the game looks, because as we said, natural motion for us on a screen is usually 24 frames. So any game we play is running faster, but it's a game with input. So like that matters, and that's why Twitch shooters have to be preferably be played at 60 because
Right.
Every frame matters. It's not so much that games running at 30 are better than 60 or vice versa. It's just the argument surrounding it that never fucking ends.
Dies.
And I feel like people just like are need to take games on a game by game basis and stop being again, we were talking about it before just about politics off camera, but so obsessed with the orthodoxy of 1080 60 that they're not like, wait a minute, Game X doesn't need to run it. Like the Game X looks fine at 720.
Right.
And like
Yeah.
it's not, the gameplay's not benefiting from the 60 frames a second. It runs at 45 and it's locked. Like who cares? You know what I mean? Like, or running at 30 more likely and locked. And it's like, I don't know. So to me, it's not so much that those options matter, but so much about the focus on those things as opposed to, is the game good or is the game bad? Is the gameplay fun? Is the gameplay bad? If the gameplay is bad, could it benefit from an enhanced frame rate? If not, let's drop the subject for this particular game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Naughty Dog's even come out and said for Uncharted 4, like their goal isn't 60 frames per
No,
second.
yeah.
They're like, we'll try to do that, but it really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and it's
we just
very
want to make
true.
the
It
game
doesn't-
look and run the best it possibly can.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful game. Like it's not adding anything to it.
Well, see, I would also add that for that game, it might not behoove it to run at 60 frames per second because that game does heavily revolve around
Yes.
a cinematic quality.
Yes,
right?
it's probably more that they can't fit it into the game.
Was the order at 24? Was that what you're saying?
I
Or
thought
were
it
you
was
just saying
24.
that?
It was going for. I don't think it was at 24. It was probably
that'd
at
be
least
weird.
the 30.
Yeah,
I don't think
it was
anyone would
30.
It'd be
purposely
interesting
do a game at
to
24.
see a game at 24. Like I wonder
30
if
or
it would
60.
have that.
Well,
the
you'd have to.
feeling.
That's just the other thing, though, too, because there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into film acquisition that doesn't go into games, specifically depth of field and motion blur. And so a
Well, I
lot
feel like
of
they add that now.
you
though.
get
Yeah,
you
they
get
do.
that, but it's not a staple. It doesn't behoove you to have depth of field in a game like a third-person shooter, for instance, because you need to be able to see all the way down to your distance to figure out what's going
Yeah.
on. If they had depth of field, it would be a physical impossibility to play a third-person shooter because you would have to choose
What
where
you're seeing,
They do
yeah.
it a lot. They do it. You're specifically referring to like when they in Call of Duty when you do this and you've got like. There's like a depth of field around you, so you can't see what's here because you're focused, 20 feet or 30 feet down the barrel. That's accurate. But with film, you have, the DP is choosing what you're seeing via the use of depth of field, and they're also inherently, depending on the aperture and your settings of the camera, or how you chosen to shoot that, you can get a specific amount of motion blur in there, which actually, again, has that psychological effect of like it's more cinematic. It's lulling the person that's watching it into more of a passive experience.
Yeah.
You don't get motion blur, especially in first-person shooters, because you don't want that. Like you want everything to be as crisp as possible because you want it to be 60 frames because you want it to resolve so quickly and so precisely that you can see things way far away. Right?
Yeah, it's also in games the unintended consequences of trying to run your game as meaty as possible. It creates all sorts of problems in the game. Like it doesn't have to, and there are games that run at 60, 1080 that run beautifully, but it can lower resolutions. It can cause screen tearing and like all sorts of like problems that just occur because the game's using too much processing power by having to run at this high resolution that maybe it didn't need necessarily run at. Of course, this is also coming from the opposite angle that some people do, which is just that these consoles are not strong enough, and maybe that's an argument too, especially with PCs, which are like way stronger than the PS4.
I was gonna put that on there as one of my other things. PC gaming in general. Period. I hate that technology fucking shit.
Yeah,
Is that
it's
because
pretty bad?
that's because you're
Because it never works. I tried to play a game this weekend. I plug in a controller. No. Oh, you're trying to use an Xbox. It's set for Xbox 360, not Xbox One. I plug in the Xbox 360. Doesn't work. Restart everything. Restart it. No, it doesn't work.
It's just
Going
all
to key
knowledge.
bindings,
It's
it
a knowledge
doesn't
base
work.
that you just need to know. And once you know it, you're like, how can you not know this? It's so simple. But
Right.
it's like, oh yeah, you just need to go to the site, download the driver, update the driver, make sure that it fits with the BIOS.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what half those words mean.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like once you do, you're like, how do you not know it? But it's like the topic we had a couple weeks ago about teaching someone games that doesn't know games.
Sure.
It's like, oh yeah, just pick up the controller, hit the X button, then go to the menu and whatever. It's like that means nothing to them.
Oh, the
Even though it's
cameras
so
are the
simple.
hardest for
Yeah,
new people.
all that stuff.
They
So
can't
it's like
figure out the
PC gaming, man, even to gamers, is like console gamers.
Well,
is
see, and this
difficult.
is the thing that scares me, right? Is because what you guys are describing is sort of a standard, right? There needs to be a sort of commonly upheld standard for anything to thrive, right? We have to all agree, like, hey, this is kind of the experience we want, and we'll rally around this and we'll support it financially. So this is what terrifies me about the smooth motion shit is that it's installed on
common-
every TV
Yeah.
and it's on. When you turn your TV on, you're like, oh, my TV looks awesome, right? And don't get me wrong, if you're watching like a Real Housewives show or a Kardashian show and it's shot in 30 frames per second, and you want to go for it, right? Who cares? But when it comes to film, if you're watching Interstellar, it's 60 frames per second. Christopher Nolan would probably come to your house and strangle you. He would probably just strangle the life out of you and then go on to the next household. That's what I imagine him doing right now.
Yeah.
Damn.
In between
That's why he
films,
doesn't make
he's
no
just-
movies.
It's
really busy.
to each his
Yeah,
own.
it's
If,
a long list.
I give people shit. If that's it's your TV, that's how you want to watch. That's how you want to watch. But just know that that is not how the artist intended this thing to come to you.
Yeah, no, I mean it's insulting. I said earlier that it's really bad. Like you said that it makes everything all vibrant and shit. And it really does. It ruins the image. It looks like a thumbnail that I made, where it's like
but-
I don't know how I'm photoshopping. I'm just putting this together and
Right.
turning the vibrancy up and
Yeah.
hoping it catches people's eye. But
By the
that's how
way-
every image looks.
But you can do that without having the frame. I don't care if you like to watch, like I specifically like to watch everything that's a film with very muted settings, the way that most film is. I like to try to get my TV to mirror the color that they've actually colored, how they've actually done the brightness and contrast pass on their film as much as possible. So if you watch something on my TV and you're used to that vibrant color, you're probably gonna be like, wait, what the hell? Why is it so desaturated? I try to get it as true to form, in other words, as humanly possible. But if you like vibrancy, dial up the vibrancy. Go to that game setting or the.
I mean, if people's faces aren't orange, you're not doing it right.
That's fine. You can do that. You can get a crisp image out of your TV and a very saturated image out of your TV without doing the frame blending. It's really the frame blending is the only thing that really kills me. Like everything else, if you want everything you watch to look like a Michael Bay film, great. Do that. If it all has to look like Bad Boys 2, fuck it. Make it look like Bad Boys 2. But for the love of God, don't destroy that thin fabric between cinematic and reality. Just don't do that.
Yeah, I think, and
No, it's in my house.
One of the points you made too is just like, what is the vision of the filmmaker? What is the vision of
Yeah.
the game creator? And that's always the thing that bothered me with games and this whole 1080p, 780 or 720, 30, 60 thing is like, what is the intent of doing that? You know,
Right.
with a finite amount of resources, was the game going to be prettier if they did this at this frame rate? And does this make sense? In other words, there's just no answer. Yeah, if you like 60, 1080, more power to you, because I think games are probably generally prettier that way and look better that way. But it doesn't always have to be that way. So what is the way? What is the reason behind it? It's not because developers are lazy. It's because this is the way the game was going to run.
Right.
You know, Witcher 3 would not run at 60 frames a second. You know,
That's too much information.
Like it's just not, and like it doesn't have to.
So
So like,
isn't the argument more though less about them like, oh, everything should be 1080 60 and more if the systems aren't equal? Like I feel like most
well,
of the time
that's
the
a-
argument comes up.
Yeah.
It's like, well, fuck you. This is the
Yeah,
better
P-
version because it's on.
Well, PS4 runs games better than Xbox One generally, and it was the exact opposite last time. But that's an argument too. But you see a lot of people saying like, "Oh, 30 frames, like fuck 30 frames a second, or it's running in 720, like without even knowing anything about the game." You know, and it's like, okay, like, who cares? Like, that's the thing that bothers me. Where it's like, you're just gonna, that's just it.
This
That's it.
arbitrary choice is
Yeah,
what turns you on
like the
or
game's
off
at
for a
30.
game.
That's it. I guess a lot of people, it's like, so you didn't like The Last of Us?
Yeah.
You know, or like,
And they're like, no, we didn't.
so like that's more what I'm saying. You're right that it's more like it's deeper than that. But I see a whole lot of stuff on the internet where I'm like, but the game's running at 30 or the game's
Right.
and I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
You know, is it like, let's see if it affects the gameplay.
Let me ask you this all important question. What did Mega Man 2 run at?
I have no idea.
I mean,
Something
but that's
that's like
the thing, though.
unfathomable.
It wasn't constant.
It was 60
That's for
frames. It was
damn
60
sure.
frames except for it's presumably 60 frames except for the slowdown.
Right.
When too many enemies are on screen.
Yeah, when there's too many
And by
enemies or
too many means like 3.
It's not even enemies. I mean, what's so fascinating about Mega Man 2 is that, or just Mega Man games generally, is that, and I've talked about this I think on other shows, is that Mega Man had huge bosses that a lot of games couldn't figure out how to do. And what Capcom was doing was making the bosses the background. And that's why there would be like certain, so like Gamma in Mega Man 3 is the last boss, but he's just the background. And then there's like certain things that are like laid over him so the game actually runs. And so you'll notice that you can like run through certain parts of him, and like certain parts of him don't get affected by any shots or anything like that. It's because like the big dragon in Mega Man 2 that chases you is the background.
Oh, fascinating.
You know, and so like they'd figure out like these kind of really clever solutions to get around these problems of slowdown, but there was still plenty of slowdown. And the problem is that you created your own slowdown almost always by
Because you
shooting.
would blow stuff up, yeah. Shoot
So,
stuff.
yep.
Fascinating.
Good topic.
Good topic.
My final piece that pisses me off when I go to somebody else's house and they have technology is when they leave the stickers on it, the protective stickers.
Ooh,
like when they
yeah.
have a DualShock and they still have them. Like,
Yeah, see, my thing is,
You just pull it off. Tom.
there's certain stickers that I hate being taken off, but there's some that I'm like, I'm okay keeping them on for a while. What I hate is when people take off your stickers. So fuck you, Kevin Coelho. Leave my goddamn
you take stickers
on
off
my
from people?
shit.
That's bad. Don't do
Yeah.
that.
It's
For
just
what?
the
Like on
worst.
what?
He just
like your
does the
phone?
piss.
I don't know anything.
Laptop.
Like fucking
Why'd you leave
anything.
it on your laptop?
I don't know.
Phone?
My biggest problem is
Why
when he
is it on your
takes it
phone?
off and he doesn't take it off cleanly and there's all the fucking sticky white shit.
It's really
Have that
satisfying
issue.
taking it off, though.
It is.
You stole it from him.
But,
What is the most satisfying sticker to take off? I'm going to throw it out
That's
there.
a topic for another day.
Is it?
Yeah.
All
that's
right.
Totally
You can make a
topic.
full
You
topic
saved
out of
it,
that
yeah.
question.
Yeah, we can definitely.
You know us. We
You
can
get topics
I
out of
know
way
what it
stupider
is.
things than that.
Yeah. Nick, that topic wasn't stupid. In fact, it was so good it was sponsored by Squarespace. Start your free trial site today with no credit card required at squarespace.com. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code KINDAFUNNY to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Now, Nick, you've used the Squarespace.
I have indeed.
You've
We
built our site with it.
Kindafunny.com on Squarespace right now. You can go check it out right now.
They like to say it's easy and good. Is this true?
It is. I've talked about this before. It's one of those things where when we decided to leave our old jobs and form this brand new company, of course, we did not leave ourselves enough time to do everything we had done on our to-do list. So I was down to about 2 days to get the site up and running. Now, barring me figuring out what was going on the hosting side, Squarespace was very, very easy to just kind of get a nice, good look, clean look up and ready to rock and roll.
All right. So squarespace.com.
If you
Offer
want
code KINDAFUNNY.
if you're wanting to do anything simple, portfolio work, any of that stuff, definitely check out Squarespace.
They say they give you 24/7 online support. Beautiful website for only $8 a month. You can get a free domain if you buy Squarespace for a year. So what are you waiting for? Start a free trial with no credit card required and start building. What are you waiting for? What am I waiting for? Squarespace. There you go. Thanks for sponsoring this episode. Everybody go there. Use the code KINDAFUNNY.